So, good evening and a warm welcome back to another session in the series of Meeting an Expert. It's indeed going to be a very interesting session, just like all the other sessions that we have had so far. So, to start with, I would like to welcome all the students who are in the platform joining us today from postgraduate school, from undergraduate level programs, and of course from our counterpart universities as well. So, in addition to that, a warm welcome to all our delegates who are joining from all around the world, and indeed our special guest today as well. A warm welcome. So, to start off for the day, let me hand it over to our chairman, Mr. Bandulai Godage, to share his expressions along with a welcome. So, over to you.
Thank you, Kaushali. Let me welcome our guest today, Mr. Dillip Rajakarier. In fact, he's a group CEO. I think you get the right introduction from Dr. Rohanta. It's a great privilege to welcome you here, sir, in spite of your busy schedule. It's a great privilege, and also it's happy to take you in this important session. On behalf of our CEO, Mr. Roshane Godake, and the board of directors, and the participants, all our student population, and probably all the CEOs forum will be connected to our diplomatic circle and overseas joinees. So warmly welcome all the group here. The good initiative created or initiated by Dr. Rohanta, whole objective is this sort of a webinar and bringing opinion leaders like you, Dillip. Our objective is to give the direct intervention and direct connection to our student population to get the maximum experience and your output to our students. So because our days we didn't have that option. So every Wednesday, Dr. Rohanta bringing a certain opinion leaders like you to enhance the knowledge of our student population as well as to share our experience vice versa. So today is basically we know that due to COVID pandemic, the most affected or impacted area is hospitality business. So therefore, we are talking the right discussion. We are talking into some points of the tourism industry, the way forward, which is integral part of any MBA student in my case, because we cannot talk economy without tourism, or we cannot talk hospitality business. It is worldwide thing. As you all know, Dillip, APIT known as for the quality education. So obviously, whoever joining for APIT, APIT will give you the right guidance for their graduation. But our intention, Dr. Rohanta's intention is not only that. As a whole, APIT believes in many extracurricular activities. That means your leadership skills. You should know not only your degree, you should know the practical aspect of anything. So once you become a graduate, we want everyone who is leaving APIT as a all-rounded the personality. So this will certainly enhance their knowledge on top of their academic excellence. So without further doing, thank you very much for being with us, sir. And also I request all my student population and also the listeners to get the maximum output from Mr. Dillip Rajakarier. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Over to you, Kaushali and Dr. Rohan.
Thank you very much, Chairman. That was the Vice President of Nestle, the Chairman of the Industrial Association of Sri Lanka, and former Chairman, Sri Lanka Export Development Board, Bandulai Godage. Thank you very much. And Dillip Rajakarier is our guest today, Group CEO of Minor International, CEO of Minor Hotels, and Avani and Anantara Hotels. He joined MH in 2007 as the Chief Finance and Investment Officer and was promoted to the Chief Operating Officer in 2008. In 2011, he was promoted as CEO, and more recently in January 2020, he was appointed Group CEO of Minor Internationals, alongside his leadership role as CEO of Minor Hotels. During his tenure with the company, he has been the group's co-Anantara brand grow from just a handful of properties to become a leading operator and developer, currently with 43 luxury properties in operation. Since joining MH, from Orient Express Hotels, trains and cruises, Rajakarier has been instrumental in the expansion of the hotel portfolio, including the 2018 acquisition of the NH Hotel Group, the addition of the Tiwali Hotels and Resorts, and the 11 Africa, the integration of Sun International, and the strategic acquisition of the Oak Hotels and Resorts was once a very, very key part of his whole pedigree. In 2018, Mint was transformed into a truly global hospitality company following the successful completion of its tender offer to shares in NH Hotel Group, which secured 94.1% shareholding stake at a total investment of euro 2,327 million. The acquisition increases Mint's overall portfolio to 536 hotels, resorts, 56 countries across the Middle East, Asia Pacific, Europe, South America, Africa, and the Indian Ocean. Rajakarier is responsible for the company's overall strategy across the business units, including the corporate shared services of legal, IT, finance, as well as talent development, business culture. He's tasked with expanding Mint's core business of hospitality, restaurants, and lifestyles into a globally recognized leader. Minor Hotels is an international hotel owner, operator, investor in diverse portfolio of brands, including the Anantara Avani Oaks, Tivoli, M Collection, NH Collection, NH Henhau, and Elavana. Dillip is, I work with Dillip on a board in Sri Lanka for almost 6-7 years, and it was fantastic to learn so much from you. A true Sri Lankan product gone global, and I think is one of the most outstanding tourism professionals who has really made the grade globally. It's actually an honor to have you, sir, today. And over to you to talk to us about tourism, the way forward.
Thank you, Dr. Rohantha. I'm very humbled and privileged to join this forum today. And I'll also like to thank Mr. Bandula as well for allowing me to participate today in the forum. And I think when we talk about tourism moving forward, tourism has always been one of the key sectors, especially a key sector in Sri Lanka, which has been driving its economic growth over the past years. And in most countries, tourism has been one of the key drivers as well. And today, when we look at tourism, even pre or post-pandemic, it's a sector which will still grow, and it's poised to grow in a multitude of ways, mainly because of the drive coming from the new emerging markets. Like say, for example, in the old days, tourism was mainly focused around the European segment or the European market. We quickly moved from that into focusing tourism with the Russian markets. And then from that, we evolved into the other markets, into the Indian segments or the Indian market. And most recently, tourism has been a key growth driver from the Chinese as well, who pretty much emerged coming out of from a tourism perspective. And why is that? And I think if you look at the tourism growth and the landscape, some of these big markets are pretty much growing, mainly because of the population size. Like, for example, China has a population size of 1.3 billion people. And actually out of 1.3 billion, only about 10% of the population actually have passports to travel. And even with that, pre-pandemic, China has been one of the key markets in terms of tourism sector, and the growth driving into most countries as a main market. And I think all we have to do is just imagine, what will happen that if that 10% becomes 15% or 20%. And then we also have other markets, like say, for example, India. India is another big growth market, and especially I'm talking about tourism from a Sri Lankan specific perspective as well. And then India again has a population of more than 1 billion. And again, the mid class or the middle class has been growing quite exponentially, mainly because of the wealth which has been created. And the same applies to China as well. And then, of course, we have the other sectors, which are the European sector, and of course, the US, South America, and others as well. So therefore, I think, when we have one of the key markets or the growth sectors, which actually fuels the industry or the country in terms of employment, in terms of foreign exchange, in terms of bringing in a high quality guests into the country who will actually spend, and also preserving our natural resources, what we have, and especially goes for Sri Lanka, which has been blessed with so much of an abundance of natural resources. We as Sri Lankans have to be quite mindful about how we actually promote this tourism in the future. It needs to be promoted in a very sustainable way. And I think and there are certain countries who've done it quite successfully, preserving its nature, its beauty, and also its resources, and not allowing any harm to happen. For example, we are a company, our group is pretty much focused on sustainable tourism. We are part of the Dow Jones Sustainability Index. We are part of the FTSE for Good Index, and we are also part of the ESG, which in today's world, people look at it in a more specific way. Why? It's important that we all take ownership and make sure that we create sustainable tourism moving forward. Some of our partners, some of our banks, some of our investors are actually looking at and promoting companies or industries which are actually leading this sustainable tourism. And sustainable tourism is all about, it's about people, it's about planet, and it's about the environment. And how do we actually protect these three, the three pillars, and grow the tourism in a very sustainable way? So that is one thing I think we all need to focus on. And again, when you look at the future of tourism, I would say, there is the new Gen Z, which is also coming up. And we feel that in the future, the Gen Z will make up about 70% of the travel in the future. Again, the expectations are very different to the normal, the other generations. In the other generations, tourism was all about sea, sun, and sand. And that's the only experience sort of which tourism offered in the past. But today, tourism has completely evolved, and there's much more to tourism than sea, sun, and sand. For example, people are looking for experiences. People are looking for storytelling experiences. People are looking for exceptional, stories where they can go and share with their friends. And again, what happens with that? When we have tourism driven under these milestones, that actually promotes the country, and it really positions the country as a high-end destination as well. Because people talk, word of mouth is much stronger than advertising in newspapers or public or PR. I think it's really important. Social media today is one of the key drivers. Digitalization has become, again, an important factor. And as part of that, innovation also is becoming a crucial success in terms of how these companies will evolve over the next few years. Some companies who haven't embraced technology, digitalization, and innovation, even some of the, as MBA students, I'm sure you've got much more knowledge and much more wider spread than what I have today. You have seen how companies can go out of the radar pretty quick if they're not agile, if they don't embrace technology, if they don't drive digitalization. And the other one is what we call transformation, which is quite important. It doesn't matter which industry we are in today, like whether it's tourism, whether it's production, whether it's technology, every single industry is touched by technology, it's touched by innovation, it's touched by transformation. And I think that's a key thing. Again, that also relates to tourism as well. What's happened post-pandemic, during pandemic or pre-pandemic, we were quite comfortable. Most of the hotel companies, they were never ready for a pandemic in such a big scale. What's happened today, I think we were quite lucky. Being in Thailand as a company which has evolved around, we started as a Thai company. And if you look at Thailand has gone through we've gone through many upheavals over the years. And it's been a variety of things, whether it's the tsunami, whether it's the floods, whether it's the weather-driven disasters, to what we call the environmental factors, or whether it's the pandemics such as SARS, bird flu, swine flu, MERS, and most recently with COVID, to political violences. Like, we've had many coups, we've had red shirts, we have yellow shirts protests, and all these things. And almost every year, we've had this. And therefore, as a country, we've learned a lot. We know how to deal with these things, and we know how fast tourism comes back. So from that perspective, like, when my colleagues in the industry talk about, this industry is going to take at least 2 or 3 years to rebound, I don't actually agree, because the reason I don't agree is that in Europe, they have never faced a pandemic of this scale. Europe was never ready. But whereas in Asia, we have gone through many of these issues, and Asia was ready to tackle the thing. Unfortunately, in Asia, the issue we've had is to procure the vaccines, and where we have been quite slow. So the vaccination has actually set us back a little bit. But now, even when I look at Sri Lanka, with the speed of vaccination, and in most Asian countries with the speed of vaccination, and releasing some of the restrictions and opening up the country, tourism will rebound. The reason I'm saying that is I use data points, and I use actual figures in terms of looking at the outlook. And the reason is that when I'm sitting in Europe today, and Europe is one of the first countries to emerge out of the pandemic. Why? Europe has been very fast in terms of vaccination, even though they've had some challenges, in terms of restrictions. Country to country, the restrictions are different, which actually poses some challenges. But, when I look at tourism today, most countries are opening up and the demand is coming very strong. So when people say it's going to take 3-4 years for this industry to rebound, I don't agree. I think it will rebound much faster, depending on the speed of vaccination and depending on the governments actually releasing these restrictions and making and opening up borders as well, which is quite important. What we have to do is we have to make sure that the pandemic, which is a humanitarian-driven situation, doesn't become an economic crisis. And clearly, some countries are already facing, and it's very sad to see also Sri Lanka has been declared an economic crisis zone, and the people are suffering. And this is mainly because of the speed and how we react to the pandemic, how we balance the two. How do you balance the humanitarian crisis, which is the pandemic, and how do you balance the economic crisis as well? I think it's quite important, and where we have to make some tough decisions to make sure that the country is stable, the country is safe, and the country is ready to open, and the country doesn't face an economic disaster in the future. The economic disaster can be a long-term impact, whereas the impact on the pandemic will be a short-lived disaster, because the people will start to travel, the economy will turn around, and also travel will resume pretty quick. So therefore, from that perspective, I believe that the way to tourism, I think the sector is very strong, mainly because of the spend we have enjoyed over the years, and also with the rising population size, and also most countries opening up, it's going to become a key sector. And in some countries, it's also a key sector in terms of the drive of the economy as well. As long as our country leaders recognize the fact that tourism is a sector, and as long as we promote tourism in the right way, and also promote sustainable tourism in the right way, I think most countries will come out quite strong. So that will be my short synopsis and to you. And I'm most privileged to join this session today. I'm happy to share my experiences. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Dillip. And I think it was a fantastic summary of how the world is going to look at. And I think one of the key points that you mentioned was that it's not only just the world, but I mean, our part of the world is very much used to these kinds of challenges and setbacks. And you're right, we will get back stronger and quicker. I think it's very, very interesting. Thank you very much. And just to get a few thoughts, Dillip, let me share a few questions, and there are also some questions coming on WhatsApp. One issue, Dillip, which is emerging is that, like, for example, countries like Singapore, which was like at about 80% actually vaccinated, but then you have the 20% which is unvaccinated, and then you have this they are spreading the virus, and now apparently today, just now, a few minutes ago, I got a mail text which says that calls to grow among experts in Singapore for vaccination mandate as COVID-19 once again spikes. So, like you very rightly said, we have the vaccination program, and we believe with the vaccination program, you could, again, resume our whole program. Why do you think, how do you think tourism will evolve because of this pandemic changing the mutation on a constant basis, Dillip?
I think it's a good question, Rohan. I think, when you look at the industries or the countries today, what is sad is the sad state of affairs is the most of the tier one or the growth economies, the issue they have is that people are not embracing the vaccines, or people are scared. And when you look at the third world or the developing economies, such as Sri Lanka, for example, the bottleneck is the vaccination, or we don't have enough vaccines to vaccinate our population size. So it's a totally the opposite to the growth economies. And I think, until such time we get to 80-85% of our population size vaccinated. And also, we also have to agree that, with the kids today, especially less than 10 or 15 years old, they are quite resilient and they're quite strong. And it's we always say, at the end of the day, COVID is like another flu. Yes, there's been casualties. Yes, there's been deaths. And yes, it's been spreading fast. And the reason is that, if you look at most of the countries, people die of normal flu, every day. In the UK, these people die, about 15,000 people die a day of flu. No one talks about it. Why is that? It happens over a period of time. It happens over the year. And it's something which is controlled. People do take the flu jab. And even if you take the flu jab, you can get the flu. But the impact is not as severe as not having the vaccine. So I think the vaccination becomes key. And what's happened with the pandemic is that everything happened at the same time. So the spread was so high, which put a lot of stress on the health workers, on the hospitals, and therefore we couldn't manage it in the right way. And also most countries were not prepared and not ready to do it. Of course, certain countries, even the developed countries like UK, made a big mistake last year because they said, you know what, we're going to create the whole thing where, we're going to create a herd immunity. And the herd immunity will actually be created, which will actually control the spread, and people will get used to it. And yes, people will survive. It was a big mistake because they were never used to this kind of a pandemic. So, but you can create herd immunity once you get to 85% of the vaccination, and after that, people are safe. So I think even today, people who are double jabbed are being impacted. I know many of our team members who have had both shots have had COVID, but the good thing is, or the positive thing is that it's not as severe as not having the vaccine or not needed to get into hospital. So again, I think Singapore as a country, they did a really good job at the start, but of course they lost control. Same as Thailand, for example. Same as Sri Lanka, for example. We managed to control the spread and everything, but then when the migrant workers and when the factory workers started to spread the disease, it spread like wildfire, and it went out of control. And that's the reason, some of the countries are facing these issues today. And look at Australia today. Even I think Australia is gone on the spectrum. They've gone to a totally different space where when you have 10 or 15 cases, they shut down the country, which is crazy. I think it needs to be a balance between restrictions, between shutdown, and also administering vaccinations as well. So that's what I would say, when I look at what's happening in Singapore. The Prime Minister came out few weeks ago and said, we're going to open up the country. And the week after, the spread was so heavy, he said, no, we're going to shut down again. So sometimes, the tourism becomes, it becomes quite a big challenge because you don't know. Things are changing on a weekly basis within a country. So as a guest, if you're traveling to these countries, you're still nervous about what will happen. What will happen if I get stuck there? What will happen with the medical conditions? Who will look after me? Who is going to pay for it? And these are some of the big issues we will have in the coming days or the coming months, which is going to be very short term, to start to revive the tourism sector.
That's a beautiful comment given by Dr. Bharati Singh, who is heading the MBA program in Staffordshire University in UK. She's saying fabulous synopsis, especially around the need to adapt technology and also to adapt quick changes. Thanks, Dr. Bharati. Really, really nice. I know you're one of our fans for this CEO webinar on Wednesdays. Dillip, how do you think things will pan out for Thailand? Because there was initial opening in Phuket, and then again it ran into an issue. Is there some lessons we can pick up to our part of the world?
Yeah, sure. So I think what we did in Thailand was we drove the opening of the borders. So we actually had many meetings with the government, even up to the Prime Minister level, where we said we will vaccinate the whole population, for example, in Phuket and in Samui, because Phuket is an island. Same as the Maldives, look at what Maldives did. If Maldives didn't open up its borders last year in August, this country is so driven by tourism. The GDP is all by tourism. And by shutting down the country, the people suffered, the country suffered, and they ran out of foreign exchange. And the only way out was for the country, the leaders to come out and say, okay, we're going to vaccinate people and we're going to open. And they did really well, actually, because actually we opened our sites in Maldives. We have 6 hotels in the Maldives. We opened them in October. We had the best December ever, so much so. Why is that? There's such a big pent-up demand and people started to travel. So we took the same example to the government and we said, look, you really need to focus on tourism. And you really need to, if you want to really drive tourism, you need to focus on this. And what we said was, let's start to vaccinate all the people in Phuket, and let's open Phuket as a sandbox. So people can fly into Phuket. Why? Phuket is seen, it's an island, and it's got its own hub. So the flights can fly in and out of Phuket. Phuket is an international airport. So it was a perfect way to experiment the sandbox. And I think in a way, yes, there were some glitches along the way, but because of course people panic, and of course you're going to get cases. There will be people who come in, who fly in, and will be tested positive. But that doesn't stop tourism, or that doesn't stop, because we can deal with that. We have the infrastructure to deal with that. But the main thing was to get the whole country or the population of Phuket vaccinated, so that they will be safe. And that was our main priority. And that's what we did. So we vaccinated everyone in Phuket, and we opened the country quite safely. We also made sure that the health, safety, and hygiene requirements was practiced quite carefully. People still wear masks and do their hygiene things as well. So I think it was important from that perspective. So so that's been a great success for us. And now we're planning to open Samui, and I think we will plan to open Bangkok as well in the coming months, once we get 70% of the population sort of vaccinated. I think it's important. It sends, because this country is so much driven by tourism, and to shut down the doors and to close the borders is not sustainable anymore. We've been shut down since March last year, and this cannot carry on. So again, I think that's what Thailand did, and it's working really well.
Dillip, I wish more people from Sri Lanka listen to you. Because see, what happens is we hear this rhetoric from the government, and sometimes we don't believe, to be very honest, because I mean, when you have your loved ones dying, and you have so many people who are going in and out of hospitals, your mindset is in a different perspective. But then, when you hear of a person like you who has seen the bigger picture, how the countries have moved on, it gives a lot of confidence, because it's a doer who is telling us. I mean, it's really motivating. Believe me, I think it's one of the best messages I have heard in the last 3 months. I'm being very honest with you, Dillip. So, Dillip, what do you think a country like Sri Lanka should do in the backdrop of, let's say, we are now opening up? We are opening up because we have no option, because we have a foreign currency issue. I mean, you have so many properties here, you are aware of it much more better than me. So what should we do from Sri Lanka to attract? Because the point I'm asking is that, that most of our tourists that come here are senior citizens, because of the kind of product range that we tend to offer. But like you very rightly said, that group will be somewhat careful to come and travel, because they are the people who are having all the underlying cases, and they are kind of, so in that background, what do we have to change our total target group in terms of who we are trying to go after, as well as we also have to ask ourselves as to what we should do in the short term, because there is a pent-up demand. What is your view, Dillip?
I think, as a true Sri Lankan, I'm very passionate about the country, because I always say that, we always said Sri Lanka is a pearl in the Indian Ocean, and we need to maintain that. Actually, for me, I get very disappointed when I see hotels being constructed on the beach with high rises, losing its natural resources, losing it's the beauty you're losing. And not only that, you're really damaging the environment as well, which is quite sad to see. But I think in terms of tourism, we all saw what happened, especially, 2 years ago or 3 years ago, when the catastrophic event, the bomb went off. And that was a security issue. And that was something uncontrollable, but it is a high risk. It's totally different to a pandemic. And we saw how strong the tourism came back within 6 months, because of the country and because of what it's offering. But the only thing I would say in Sri Lanka is, in terms of how we can innovate ourselves and how we can promote tourism in the future, is that initially, whether we like it or not, when the borders start to open up, it's going to be domestic or regional travel, which is going to come. There's no point expecting like long haul travel because, as you rightly pointed out, Rohantha, people are worried, people are scared to make that long haul trip. Not because they're scared to come to Sri Lanka, but they're also scared what restrictions where they live will be imposed as well. Like say, for example, UK, people went to Mexico. They spent thousands of dollars flying to Mexico. And then UK said, okay, Mexico is now on the red list. So all those people who went had to fly back because otherwise they would have had to do a state quarantine, staying in hotels in London and spending more money. So there is a lot of uncertainty. And I think I blame a lot on the politicians as well, because I think, I wish they are more aligned and they make decisions which are more aligned and it's good for the country. But actually, when you look at, I don't want to talk specific, but I'll give you a good example. I was in Germany. I went to Germany. I was in Spain. I went to Germany. I am fully vaccinated in the UK. But to fly to Germany from Spain, I had to do a PCR test. But the Europeans, the Spanish who flew with me, they didn't have to do any tests because they have the EU green passport or the vaccination passport. I have the NHS passport, which I am fully vaccinated as well. And it's the same vaccine. We're all using the same vaccine. We're all using AstraZeneca. We're all using Pfizer, but the requirement's different. Like last week I was supposed to go to Amsterdam. And again, Amsterdam put UK on the red list, on the high risk. Why? Because it's just tit for tat. Politicians are playing tit for tat, which is quite sad to see, because UK put Amsterdam or Holland on a red list a few months ago. So now Amsterdam thought, okay, we're going to do the same for you. It doesn't work. The politicians have to align and the politicians have to work together if this industry is going to come out or the economy, to save the economy, to save an economic disaster, which is looming pretty fast. Like, UK is in a huge debt. All the countries are in a huge debt, not just Sri Lanka only, like we're all in debt. But if you don't do something about it, nothing is going to happen. So I think from that perspective, like, Sri Lanka, yes, tourism will come back strong, but I think we need to focus on the regional and the domestic market. But what is important is that we need to focus on the right level of tourists. In Sri Lanka, it's sad to see that most politicians talk about numbers. They say, oh, we're going to get from 1.2 million tourists or 2 million tourists, we're going to get to 7 million tourists. I always say it's not about the numbers. It's about the quality of tourists. Even if you get 2 million high-end tourists, it's more than enough. You know why? The spend is going to be high. The natural resources will be protected and the country will make much more money, which is sad. So I think, we really need to shift our mindset and position Sri Lanka as a high-end touristic destination. There's no reason as to why we can't do it, because if you look at the offerings today, Sri Lanka has, and if you look at the offerings today, for example, Thailand has, it's the same. It's rich in culture, fantastic beaches, wildlife, wellness, everything is there. Temples, it's all there. And it's a country which has been blessed with all these resources, but it's sad that we're not really leveraging those and promoting it as a high-end destination. I think this is the big issue with Sri Lanka. And I really hope we use that. And when we do that, I think Sri Lanka will start to boom again. And also, for example, seamless travel. I always say, like say, for example, in Thailand, we operate the private jet terminal. Why? Because we have a lot of investors, a lot of guests today. If you go to the Maldives, in the month of November, December, Jan, the Maldives airport, the airlines, it's like a taxi car park because they're all full of private jets. Why? People all fly in their private jets. They come to the Maldives. They have a 2-week fantastic holiday and they go back. Why can't we do the same in Sri Lanka? Why aren't we attracting those travelers to come to Sri Lanka? Because, Maldives is an island, but Sri Lanka is a country. Yes, it has all these other experiences apart from beach and snorkeling and everything else. So these are things I would really, I get very passionate about this, when people say, how can we reposition Sri Lanka? But it's really sad because I think we really need to think different, to come up with a tourism roadmap in terms of how do we reposition Sri Lanka as a high-end tourism destination, which markets we're going to target, how we're going to bring those top guests or high-end guests into the country. How do we also attract investors to come and invest in the product, because you also need to have the right product as well, and make sure that the government incentives are there to promote investors to come and invest in the country, believe in the country, and then really drive tourism.
Dillip, one of our senior tourism professionals, Ralinda Disilla, says, exactly one of the best words coming from a big CEO. Well, Dillip, what made you do a career in tourism? Dillip, I mean, from school you liked tourism, or how did it go?
No, I didn't plan to get into tourism. My career involved quite a bit. I went into IT first because I was really keen, even against even against the wishes of my father, who thought at that time when I went into IT, he said to me, "Why do you want to become a typist?" Because that's how they viewed IT at that time. But of course, I believe, because for me that was great and I loved it. And then just to make him happy, I then also did finance and accounting and qualified as well in the UK. And I dropped into tourism it was by accident. It was a bet I had with someone. It's my career into tourism. The start of my career was a bet. I had a bet with someone and I won the bet. And the guy said to me, if you fix my system, because they had a problem with their IT system. And he said, if you fix my system, I'll give you a job. And he was running a group of hotels in London at that time. And I did fix the system. So I got the job. And that's how my career started in tourism.
So it's very strange you say this. It's very strange you say this, Dillip. I mean, 2 weeks back, we were talking about with a very senior IT professional, Madhu, the vice president of Virtusa. And he said, I selected to join Virtusa because I have a very close friend whom I go and have a drink with in the evening. And that's why I joined Virtusa. And then, about 3 to 4 weeks back, we were having a discussion with Sandra, the head of Slascom from Dialogue, and she was saying that she joined Dialogue because she loves talking to people, and she realized that she can get some free calls, which is why she joined Dialogue, and then, the other day we were talking to Kasturi from Hemas, and Kasturi was saying how when she started working initially at Someswaran, she had said, you have to pay for my education and I'll play netball for you. And that's how, so it's very strange how, we say that you need to have a career plan, but when you look at the real top professionals of today, it has happened by accident. So, Dillip, what is your advice to a youngster, studying an MBA program in a chaotic environment like today, where public policy is not done in the truest integrity that it should be done, especially in a given situation, looking at your own country and the kinds of issues that are there in typical third world countries. What is your advice to a young MBA graduate?
I think, I'll talk about it based on my experience. I feel that, as an MBA graduate, I think you should be very proud of what you've achieved today. It's fantastic. It's a great weapon you have to use to really shape up your career in the future. And it's something, as an MBA graduate, you have to always love what you do. If you don't love what you do, just leave. Go and do something else, because you don't want to cause misery for yourself, unhappiness for yourself, and getting stressed out. And also, you don't want to be a misery to the company you're joining as well. But again, as an MBA student, I always say, education is a stepping stone to great success. And it's so important. You've got the foundation today. It's key. You have to really learn. And we learn every day. I learn every day, and never stop learning, and make sure that you never stop learning. You have the passion, you have the drive, you have the tenacity, and set a goal and just go for it. Because people say, there are people who always say, well, you can't do this, we can't do this. I don't think I can do that. I don't think I can do this. There's nothing in this world you cannot achieve. Everything is achievable if you set your mind to it. I'll give you a good example. When we actually acquired NH Hotels 3 years ago in 2018, the NH Hotels, the size of NH Hotels was 3 times the size of minor hotels, because minor hotels, we only had 120 hotels at that time. And we were pretty much a regional player at that time, because we had hotels in Middle East, Africa, Asia, Australasia and stuff. We didn't have any presence in Europe or the Americas. So when I went to the board, our board, and said, look, we should go for it, because I believe this will put Minor in the global platform. This will make us a global player, and it's a fantastic deal. It's some really good hotels, and plus the fact that we can leverage our infrastructure. People sort of laughed at me and said, hey, Dillip, do you know the size of the company you're trying to buy? And I said, yes, I do. And they said, how are you going to do it? I said, yes, we do have a plan to do it. And guess what? 6 months or a year later, we did it. In spite of some of the bigger brands, the global brands tried to gazump us or tried to come and buy the NH group. We had a plan. Our execution was fast. We never, to try and fail is not a failure. Not to try is a failure. So for me, it was, I went full force, and you know what? And that, and the sense of achievement you get at the end of that process is amazing. It's rewarding. It's rewarding for the company, because it was a fantastic deal we did. We have been placed on the global platform, and today we are seen as one of the top global players today, which is great. And this is taking minor hotels from a handful of hotels. When I joined the group 14 years ago, we had about 12 hotels. And in the last 14 years, we've grown to about close to 550 hotels in 55 countries. It's not an easy thing to do, but I always believe that it's something which is doable and you can do it. So therefore, as an MBA student, you've got the foundation, which is fantastic. Make use of it. And always, some of the students always say, okay, as an MBA student, I need to go into management, or I need to do this, or I need to do that. Don't. That's a big mistake. If you can go through the rank and file, and if you can learn everything, it's the best way to do it. Why? Because you will be connected to the people. You know how the rank and file feel about things. You know how to respect them. You know how to speak to them, which is very, very important. Today, when I go to our hotels, I go and speak to the gardener. I go and speak to the housekeeper. Why? Because I want to find out, they are the ones who are in constant touch with our guests, and they know everything about our guests. And it's really key. It's important. Not only that, they feel so good. They say, wow, Dillip spent 15 minutes with me to talk about what are the guest problems we have and how can we help you and what can we do to do better. I think it's really key. So I think, connecting with people is important. To be passionate is important. Never give up. And also the world, as long as, and the other thing you have to do is to always be current, making sure that you embrace technology, you are always innovating yourself, and you're always thinking about new ideas, and you always come up with new ideas, and don't feel scared to voice them. And that's all about leadership, because as MBA students, the future, like you're the future of the country. And also, like, you shouldn't constrain yourself to just Sri Lanka. Why? As MBA students, the world is the oyster. So think global, and you can work anywhere globally. It's a bit like me. You know, I was in Sri Lanka, I left Sri Lanka, and then I moved to London, and I worked everywhere, all over the world. So therefore, don't restrict yourself to one country, and don't restrict yourself to saying, okay, you know, I'm going to be in Sri Lanka and this is what I'm going to do. I don't think so. I think if you really plan your career and your future, and as long as you love what you do, and as long as you work hard, you know, I think there's nothing easy in this world. You know, you have to work hard for it, and make sure that, you know, the world is evolving constantly, and if you don't keep up to that constant how it evolves, you will be lost. And it's really important to have that learning mindset, value your team members, create a strong team, and make sure you are surrounded with strong people, because the weak people will take you down. Always surround yourself with strong people. Always employ people who are stronger than you, so that you will look good, and always learn. And that would be my advice.
Fantastic, Dillip. I really like that last bit. Surround yourself with people who are stronger than you. You know,
Yes.
a lot of people get scared to employ people who are smart. Dillip, you know, today in the morning I was reading an article, and it said that, you know, year's pandemic was a huge hit to tourism, but it also is a fantastic opportunity to reposition your brand. I mean, what is your view on this, looking at Sri Lanka?
It's very true. It's very true. So what we did was, during the pandemic, we came up with, we were one of the first to react as a company today. And that's the reason we are so strong today as a company. And we came up with a strategy, which is called BBC, Business Beyond COVID. And we call it BBC. And what we did was, we had 3 phases. The first phase was a short-term phase, which is basically survival, and making sure that our team members and our guests are safe. So health and safety was a key driver to us. And in terms of survival, we strengthened our balance sheet, we strengthened our cash flow, we did a lot. We did cut costs. Unfortunately, there was no choice, so we had to do that. And then we had a medium term where we said, okay, what's going to happen in the medium term, and how can we come out of, reposition ourselves? And yes, I think the COVID has really topsy-turned the whole of the hospitality industry. And if you don't evolve yourself today, I think most of the hospitality companies will be gone. If we try to do business the same as before, because that doesn't exist anymore. The reason is that the demand is coming very last minute. So you can get, you can go into a panic mode when you see that, you know, start of the month, you have nothing on the books today, you know, because everything is coming last minute. And how do you change your mindset to leverage on that? So, and then also we see a lot of the new trends emerging as a result of COVID as well. You know, we see generation travel. We see grandparents, parents, kids, their grandkids traveling together. We see a lot of focus on wellness. We see a lot of focus on experiential travel. We see a lot of focus on villas. We see a lot of focus on residences. So therefore, I think there is this multitude of different markets which will emerge as a result of COVID. And if we don't position ourselves carefully, you know, some of these hotel companies could be history. And I think we have to make sure that we do it that way. And again, you know, talk about Sri Lanka. You know, we we say that we need to, how do we get the right customer segment or the right type of guests into the country? Which markets should we go after? How do we make their travel seamless? How do we create the infrastructure and the logistics for these guests? And how do we create employment? But more importantly, I think the biggest factor is how do we train our people? I think the training mindset is becoming key as well. Again, during COVID, we spent a lot of money retraining our people. So it's always, if you don't retrain, you will lose that. And I think that is key. And I think training becomes quite important. And also to look at, to look at and benchmark Sri Lanka as a country with some of the global countries to see what are the best practices we can learn. Because sometimes, when we are local, we bury ourselves our head in the sand, and we only know what we know. We don't look at the outer world, which is a big handicap. As long as you start to look at the world and think globally, your mindset will change. And therefore you can learn a lot in terms of some of the best practices. What are the other countries doing to promote tourism as well? And of course, leadership becomes a key here, because you need to have the right leadership to drive it. You need to have the right leadership to do it. And also, like, promotion becomes important. Like, you cannot leave it to the government to say, oh, the Sri Lankan Tourism Authority has the responsibility to promote tourism. No way. It will never happen. We know that. That's not the job of the government. The job, it's the job of us, to promote tourism. And it's important that the PPP, or the public-private partnership, becomes more solidified. And this is the time to solidify that and say, okay, let's promote tourism together. Let's go and promote tourism together in some of our key destinations. And let's see, okay, who are our medium-term customers or guests? Who are the long-term guests? What are they looking for? How do we create these experiences? And how do we offer it to them in a very seamless manner? And that's key.
Dillip, what is your advice going to be for the young Dillip Rajakarier joining at 21 years into different industries? I mean, what advice would you give young Dillip?
My advice is, I have a son who is 21 and, who's just starting his career. He's at university. And I always say, he always says, how do you get to this? And I always say, it's not been an easy ride. It's tough. You have to expect the unexpected. But don't worry about things you cannot control. If you keep complaining about the government, or if you keep complaining about the policies, if you keep complaining about the economy, where it's beyond your control, what are you doing? You're wasting your time. You're demotivating yourself. So always think about the things you can control, and always think about the unexpected. And to be ready, be proactive. Don't be reactive. And as I said before, one of the things I always say is, it's either you work to live or you live to work. It's totally two different mindsets. When you really think about it, I always ask our team members, do you work to live, or do you live, or do you work to live, or do you live to work? Very different. Never give up fighting. It's not in my DNA. I'm a fighter and I'm a survivor. And at the same time, I say, the team is behind me. As I said before, surround yourself with people who are stronger than you, because you learn all the time and they make you look good. The reason I look good today, not my looks, but the reason I look good today in the industry is because of my team, and because of all the other 60,000 or 80,000 team members who make me feel so good and who make me feel so proud of what we have achieved. And that's important. So you need to be a people's person. You need to have the right leadership qualities, and also always willing to learn and take risk. As I said before, to take risk and fail is not a failure. I think if Steve Jobs didn't take that risk, Apple won't be what Apple is today. Look at some of the big players today: Amazon, Apple, Tesla, some of the big companies, how they have evolved, how they have used technology, how they have used innovation, and how some of the other Fortune 500 companies have disappeared today because they never evolved and they never transformed themselves. I think it's really, really important for us to make sure that we transform ourselves and we actually embrace technology and also making sure that we become a strong people person as well. So I think those are some of the things I would say. And I'm sure there are much more things, but at least the basics would be this.
Dillip, I've been involved with the tourist industry for a long time because I was also the former chairman of Sri Lanka Tourism and worked with you very much on one of the boards for almost 6-7 years. And I think, in my view, you're one of the best products that Sri Lanka has exported to the world. So where do you go from here?
Thanks very much, Rohan. I'm so humbled about the comment. But I think, where do I go from here? Actually, my focus today, I would say, is to ensure that what I have built, that there is a legacy to leave behind, and we come out stronger than ever out of this pandemic. So that's my initial key focus, to make sure we come out quite stronger, mainly because of the 80,000 people who work for us. And also, all the stakeholders who have supported us over the last 2 years, including our shareholders, including our banks, including our team members. I don't call them staff because, it's not the right terminology I use. I always call them team members. And I think, so that is my key, what I would say, where would I go next? We started as a Thai company, we became a regional player, and today we become a global player. So the next stage is to say, how can we leverage this, and not to be the biggest hotel company in the world, but to be the best hotel company in the world, which will give all our stakeholders value. I don't talk about the number of hotels because it doesn't mean anything. It's like the number of tourists for Sri Lanka. For me, it's the best hotel company or the most profitable hotel company in the world. That means a lot, and which we can satisfy all our stakeholders. And how do our goal is always to exceed our customer expectation. And how do we do that? So I think in my journey, there's a lot to learn, and that will be my next.
Thank you very much, Dillip. Lovely chatting with you. Thank you very much for joining us all the way from London. Kaushalii, over to you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dillip. So the question remains, do you live to work or you work to live? Amazing question for everyone to think about, especially our students, because APIT is all about revolutionizing education and introducing the passion. So please do think about it, and it's amazing discussion today. And with that, we come to an end of another session, of a very informative session today. And thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much for sharing that experience, which we cannot be taking from a theoretical book. And I'm sure our students will very much benefit out of this session today. So having said that, it's time to say good night, and we will see you back again in another session. All of you, stay safe until then.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Dillip.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Stay safe.
Bye. Take care.
Bye. Bye.